May 2022, Vancouver police found 2 bodies in a one-room apartment on Vancouver's downtown east side. One of those bodies was Noelle O'Soup, a 14-year-old Indigenous girl who had gone missing from a group home a year before. There were other stories like O'Soup's, but her case stood out because she was so young and because of where her body was found. Inside a one-room apartment where the body of a man had been discovered just months earlier. Even though O'Soup's body would have been in that apartment at the time, police somehow missed it. We wondered why it took police months to find O'Soup's body, how 2 bodies were overlooked in the initial search, and how she ended up there to begin with. I started looking into this story with my colleagues Jason Proctor and Ethan Sawyer, and our investigation took us back many years to the man who lived and died there, and uncovered a disturbing story. Here's what we found. Before I get into the details, I want to warn you that some parts of this story are upsetting. It begins with the man who lived in apartment 16 at 405 Heatley Avenue. His name was Van Chung Pham, and while we couldn't find a picture of him, we did find details of a long criminal history. He came to Canada from Vietnam as a refugee, but fell into a life of crime. He was dealing drugs, racking up 13 separate charges between 1994 and 2007, and was known for targeting vulnerable women on Vancouver's downtown east side. A woman even died of an overdose in a room he was living in at Canada Hotel. As a result, Pham was well known to police and was ordered deported from Canada as early as 2016 for being a danger to the public. In October 2020, he was being held in immigration detention, and Canadian officials were actively trying to deport him to Vietnam. We obtained audio recordings from his immigration hearings. We're legally not allowed to play them, but on the files you can hear officials debating what to do. They said the Pham was dangerous to women. He'd give them drugs so they'd have sex with him, but they said because Vietnam wasn't providing the proper travel documents, there was no way of deporting him. They let him go without conditions, and he moved to the apartment at 405 Heatley Avenue. A short while later, neighbors at the apartment raised concerns to the landlord. The Pham was bringing vulnerable women to his room, but they say their warnings were ignored.
She was locked in the washroom, apparently been there for 2 hours, and he was pounding on the door hysterically. I live in a suite down the hall and over, and I could hear him.
And in November of that year, just weeks after he was released from detention, a woman says Pham sexually assaulted her after giving her powerful drugs that left her immobilized.
I think I left without my shoes on and not fully clothed, and I left really fast.
She reported her assault, and in February 2021, police obtained a search warrant for Pham's apartment. We went to court and applied to unseal that search warrant, and found police used Pham's cell phone to track him, and eventually did search the small apartment, where only a few months later, 3 people would die. Meanwhile, Noelle O'Soup, a 13-year-old Indigenous teen, was living in a group home in Port Coquitlam. Her uncle Cody applied to take custody of her, hoping she could go live with his family.
In time, I kept trying to call, trying to make the effort, just to show that girl, hey, you're not alone, I care.
But tragically, Noelle never made it home to Cody. We don't know how or when O'Soup became connected to Pham, but she went missing from her group home in May 2021. No Amber Alert was issued at the time, and many of O'Soup's own family members weren't even notified that she'd gone missing. We now know that at some point in early 2022, she died in Pham's apartment, along with another unnamed woman, but their bodies wouldn't be found until months later. In February 2022, Pham overdosed and died in his apartment, and it was when police came to tell him he was being charged with sexual assault that they found his body. And at that point, when police were in the apartment dealing with Pham's death, the bodies of O'Soup and the other woman would have been there, but somehow the police didn't come across them. Police say they didn't have the authority to search Pham's apartment because his death wasn't considered suspicious. They said in a statement, the tenant was an extreme hoarder. In the absence of a detailed search of the suite, which was not authorized by law at the time of Pham's death, there is no likelihood that anyone could have discovered Noelle's remains. But keep in mind, Pham was a known danger to women. He'd been investigated for an assault in that same apartment a year prior, and a Vancouver police officer linked to the case is currently under investigation for alleged neglect of duty in connection to the search of that apartment. Over several months, neighbors at the Heatley block began to complain of a smell coming from Pham's apartment.
The stench was months and months of that smell.
It wasn't until May that police finally discovered the bodies of O'Soup and the other woman.
Who went looking? How many times did you guys go look? Did you guys ask questions? Did you follow up on the people that were trying to call you? Like, to me, that just makes no sense. That's negligent.
We wanted to look deeper into this case because of the unusual circumstances. After covering the story for months, unsealing documents, and obtaining court records, we found out a lot about Noelle O'Soup and Pham. But there are still unanswered questions, like why didn't police find O'Soup's body in the small apartment, especially since they'd searched it before? Why weren't key family members notified by the ministry responsible for Noelle when she went missing? Who are the two other women who died in Pham's apartment and room? Even though he's dead, many wonder if there's still more we don't know about Pham.
This could have happened to many other women. Like, if he wouldn't have died and overdosed in his apartment, this could have happened to so many other women. So I definitely think that this guy should be definitely investigated as a serial killer.
Because there is no justice that will ever happen for the other girls, for me, and for past girls. I think that's what's most upsetting.
Many unanswered questions about the man who lived and died at 405 Heatley Avenue.